Most of the time, video games help us to get away from reality, allowing us to do and see things that would be impossible to experience in our boring real lives. However, while it is true that abilities such as firing lightning from your hands or exploding rocks with your ghost pal are unlikely to suddenly become applicable in real life, there are also a handful of games that attempt to double as an educational tool. Normally, this brings to mind one of those so-called edutainment games, which supposedly are meant to teach children maths and the like, but almost universally discourage kids from both playing video games and learning. Instead, we're looking at a few titles that advertise themselves on teaching or emulating some skill in an accurate way, but also remember that fun exists. So next time someone tells you that there's no way video games have any value, whip one of these out and prove to them that flying a simulated plane definitely does qualify you to fill in for a missing co-pilot, thank you very much. I'm the multi-talented Ashton from TripleJump, and here are 10 video games that teach real-world skills. Number 10, NBA Baller Beats. Oh yeah, here we go, sports time. Normally, we don't think genres like rhythm action and sports could be combined into one single game, but NBA Baller Beats decided to try it, so here we are. This odd combination came into fruition in 2012, releasing exclusively in North America and coming bundled with its own special replica basketball. Whatever that means. It was obviously meant to appeal to fans of basketball, and as such, had a bunch of in-game collectibles, such as trading cards and video highlights, for extra incentive to play. Rhythm is only part of the story though, as the moves players are expected to mimic are not synced directly to notes on an instrument, but instead are more akin to the moves in Just Dance, requiring players to simulate different basketball moves, such as dribbling and passing, in time to the beat. Despite the strange mashup of concepts, most people who gave it a go found that it did actually help improve ball handling skills. Stop your giggling! And that it could be used as a basic learning tool, even if your downstairs neighbour may not have appreciated your efforts. Of course, this all hinges on the Kinect working the way it's supposed to. So maybe it's actually the worst thing you could do to improve your basketball skills. Number 9, Master of Pottery. Sometimes getting into an artistic pursuit can be difficult, and often one of the factors contributing to this is price. Thankfully, games like Master of Pottery have come along to help save the day by allowing you to experience some of the thrill of personal expression at a fraction of the cost. This simulator recreates the entire process of pottery making, from the initial sculpting to painting and glazing, and allows for a great amount of creativity and expression while still being a fairly true recreation of the real thing. It's not just about creating masterpieces either, as each piece can be put up for display in a showroom, letting players display their works and attract visitors to admire their efforts and potentially even buy something if they are particularly interested in it. If you really want to show off, you can also export your creations for other players to admire and use. Though it won't fully imitate what it's like to work with clay, a lot of the concepts are sound, and the basics have been simulated in a fun, relaxing way. At the very least, it's guaranteed to work better than the cheap plastic pottery wheel I had as a kid, because honestly, it couldn't be much worse. Number 8, Kerbal Space Program. There are plenty of titles that pride themselves on having realistic physics, at least as best they can, and it's pretty common now to expect objects in games to act similarly to their real-life counterparts. Kerbal Space Program, though, takes this to the extreme, perhaps more than any other does. Don't let the cartoonish aesthetic fool you, because this is very much rocket science. KSP is a spaceflight simulator at its most complex, and is so realistic that even actual space agencies, including NASA and the ESA, have taken notice of it. Players are tasked with sending their crew of hapless Kerbals into space, and have a multitude of parts with which to build their spacecraft. However, you can't just tack things together and expect to make it off the ground, or at least not for very long, because there has to be enough thrust and fuel to make it off the launch pad and into space, and weight distribution has to be properly sorted. If not, the whole thing will go up in flames quite dramatically. After all this, I suppose it's time for me to do the real thing and throw my lot into the modern-day space race. Just need a few $1 billion first, so hit up the Patreon, eh? Number 7, PC Building Simulator. There comes a point in every PC gamer's life where they feel the pull to update some of their hardware in order to make sure that newer games are always running their best, assuming you can get or afford parts, that is. Before putting your fingers all over your motherboard and messing about though, why not try to figure out what's going on in there by using PC Building Simulator as a resource. As with many simulation games, there is a career mode, which will teach you the basics, such as cleaning out the dust and never forgetting to use thermal paste, and will eventually move on to more complicated requests and projects that require closer attention and accuracy, all with actual licensed PC parts. Though you are sure to pick things up as you go through this mode, there is also a mode, appropriately enough, called How to Build a PC, which will give you a more in-depth look at the inner mechanisms and show you more specifically how it all works. I still wouldn't immediately go poking around a PC and ripping bits out of it, just to be safe, but this could certainly be the first step on the journey to building your own fancy gaming rig. Number 6. Human Resource Machine. Let's say you're not so interested in the physical bits of your PC, but want to get started with the coding side of things instead. Well, lucky for you, Human Resource Machine allows you to learn the basics of how coding works by way of a fun puzzle game. By using a combination of the game's 11 available commands, players will take control of their little office worker and automate them in order to take on a number of tasks throughout their day. These start off simply, but eventually specific criteria will have to be reached, requiring certain values to be copied, added or skipped, and factored into the overall process. It's true that Human Resource Machine doesn't use a specific language, but despite that, it does demonstrate the basic logic concepts that are applicable almost universally in coding. Also, your mileage with the full game may vary, as some of the more difficult challenges are definitely easier for those who are already fairly familiar with assembly language. This is far from the only title that will help with these concepts, so even if this particular iteration doesn't call out to you, perhaps one of the many alternatives will. For some reason, coding seems to be a popular hobby for many gamers. Who could have guessed? Number 5. Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's probably no surprise that we've seen several actual simulators so far, because their whole purpose is to recreate some real-life task in a virtual world, to varying degrees of accuracy. Some have really gone all out and gotten so complicated that they're virtually undistinguishable from the real thing. And one such example is Microsoft Flight Simulator. Pretty much every aspect of flight is simulated in the game, with players having to learn the function of each of the individual instruments, ensure they don't do anything that can cause damage, and ensuring that they are cleared for landing and takeoff, as well as making sure that these go as smoothly as possible. This hyper-realism isn't limited to the aircraft itself either, as the complex weather system analyzes real data and uses it to recreate storm patterns, and other systems also simulate other planes' flight paths, all over top of an accurate scale model of Earth. This is assuming you're playing the most recent version of the simulator, that is. The early ones did what they could, but unless you happen to get sucked into Tron, this is unlikely to translate as easily into real life. Number 4. Wrench. Vehicles are expensive. I don't know if you've noticed. Even used, they can go for a surprisingly large amount of money. It's no wonder then that there are so many games that simulate cars, whether that be racing them, crashing them, or even just owning them. So get ready to get your hands dirty as we take a look under the bonnet. Still in early access at time of writing, Wrench is an experience much like that found in the Car Mechanic Simulator series, but focuses more on the racing side of things, and models every part of the car with incredible accuracy down to the tiniest fastener. Over the course of the game, players will not only complete jobs for a variety of clients, earning XP and money for further endeavours, but will be able to build and maintain their own personal vehicles as well. These will develop problems over time, which will then have to be assessed and diagnosed based on correctly identifying what exactly the issue is. If you want to get even more immersed in this ultimate motorsports enthusiast's game, there is a VR version as well. It doesn't get much more up close and personal than that. I can almost smell the oil. So much that I'm getting a bit dizzy, actually. So let's move on. Number 3. Influent. Learning a language can be a long and difficult process, especially if it's drastically different from your native tongue. However, if you're looking for a new immersive language tool and don't fancy being bullied into lessons by a certain bird, Influent is here to help. At time of writing, Influent has 23 different languages to choose from, covering a fairly wide range from Korean and Spanish to Welsh and Bulgarian, with more being planned for the future, all with native speakers for authentic pronunciation. To start out, the first words that will be collected will be nouns, by looking around the environment and selecting different objects. As you add these to vocabulary lists, you can test yourselves on all the words you've acquired thus far, earning stars, which will then unlock adjectives and verbs relating to each object. The biggest disadvantage is that there is, as yet, no way to learn any grammar or sentence structure. But if you're just looking for a way to bolster your vocabulary or get familiar with a different writing system, this is a great way to do so. In our experience though, if it fully simulated learning a new language, some of the first words you would learn would be swear words. Maybe another DLC idea then. Number 2, Art Academy. Back to the world of art now. And this time we're turning our attention to something that is much easier to replicate digitally than pottery, relatively speaking, drawing. That's right, it's time to try your literal hand at sketching with Art Academy. Less a proper game than a bit of artistic software, you could technically call this one a wildcard entry, as the only modes available are Lesson, which is exactly what it sounds like, and Free Paint, which is also exactly what it sounds like. It just so happens that this came out for the DS, 3DS and Wii U, meaning it didn't require spending money on a dedicated art tablet and had the advantage that it was targeted at beginners. You could always use it for Pictionary, I suppose. The biggest, or more appropriately, smallest problem with this title was the screen size, which could be hard to work with, as well as the omission of an undo button. However, as a starter tool, this small game was handy for an aspiring artist. The legacy of this particular title lives on, with a new game on Switch called Colors Live, which comes with its own pen and has not only many of the same tools and capabilities, but a bonus adventure challenge mode as well to really test your skills. And number 1, Rocksmith. Sure, Guitar Hero may have emulated the Rockstar experience, but it wasn't likely to get you super famous, no matter how good you were. Though there is a championship for people who play air guitar, so what do I know? However, if you really wanted to learn how to play guitar, and were morally opposed to proper lessons, there was always an alternative: Rocksmith. The basic concept is much like those of its rhythm-based counterparts, with coloured bits on a track which represent the notes, but this time each of the colours relates to a specific string of the guitar, and the position of the boxes represents where the player's hands should be, as well as showing the ideal finger placement. There's also the added bonus that you can hook up a real guitar if you have one, and with the newer iterations of the game, they've even added a mode that allows you to do the same for piano instead. Most importantly, in addition to just practicing with songs, there are several modes that focus on specific techniques and skills that are important to master as well. One of the best things is that no matter how badly you do, you can't fail. That's more than I can say for my in-person lessons, certainly.